reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable.
And this should have been done by Biden years ago. This should have never been allowed to happen. I know he's a friend of yours.
But couldn't Putin just withdraw his...
He's a friend of
today?
CNN. That's why nobody watches CNN anymore.
Karoline Leavitt and Kaitlan Collins are at it again, and this time the tension is reaching a breaking point. Their ongoing rivalry has been brewing ever since Karoline took on the role of White House press secretary, with each heated exchange leaving her one step ahead. But their latest confrontation, it was so intense that people are now questioning whether Collins can even hold her ground anymore. What exactly did Karoline say that left Collins scrambling for a response on live TV? And could this be the moment that finally cracks Collins' credibility? Stay tuned, because this showdown is one for the history books. In recent weeks, Karoline Leavitt and Kaitlan Collins have exchanged more verbal jabs than a heavyweight boxing match, turning press briefings into must-watch television. But their latest clash, it didn't just make headlines, it set off a media firestorm so massive it might as well come with its own crisis management team. It all started when Collins, known for her tough questioning, thought she had Leavitt backed into a corner with a sharp inquiry. But what happened next? Well, let's just say the response was so brutal it left even the most seasoned political watchers stunned.
Which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
At first glance, the question seemed harmless, maybe even routine, but don't be fooled. This wasn't just a simple inquiry, it was a calculated setup, a classic gotcha attempt. Kaitlan Collins wasn't just asking, she was laying a trap, hoping to expose a glaring contradiction in the Leavitt-Trump camp. With a confident smirk and an air of certainty, Collins believed she had the upper hand. The viral clip was ready to be made, the headline practically writing itself. But there was just one problem. Karoline Leavitt isn't some inexperienced spokesperson fumbling through talking points. She's a strategist, a political force, and she saw this ambush coming from a mile away. Instead of walking into the trap, she flipped the entire exchange on its head. Not only did she dodge the setup effortlessly, but she turned it back on Collins in a way that left the CNN journalist visibly rattled. By framing access to the Oval Office as a privilege, not an entitlement, Leavitt didn't just deflect, she delivered a mic drop moment. It was a textbook display of control, a reversal so sharp that before Collins even knew what hit her, the narrative had been rewritten. Now pay close attention to this clip and I'll break it down even further afterward.
And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is.
Denied her big gotcha moment, Kaitlan Collins dropped the facade and laid it all out. Her entire stunt had one goal: to weaponize the Associated Press's so-called ban from the Oval Office. The strategy? Framed the Trump administration as hypocrites, loud champions of the First Amendment who suddenly flinched when it no longer suited them. It was classic media maneuvering, and Collins was convinced she had hit the jackpot. But here's where it all crumbled. Karoline Leavitt, always 10 steps ahead, wasn't about to let Collins twist the narrative. With a calm yet razor-sharp response, she shut down the spin, reminding everyone of a promise she had made to hold the media accountable for their distortions, half-truths, and outright propaganda. And accountability meant that outlets like the AP, known for pushing misleading narratives, didn't get a free pass to the most powerful office in the world. The message was clear. Press freedom doesn't mean freedom from consequences. And just like that, Kaitlan's so-called expose backfired, turning into yet another self-inflicted media disaster. But did she finally learn her lesson? Not a chance, because here she is again, back in the spotlight, this time squaring off with none other than the leader of the free world himself, Donald Trump. Trump didn't shut her down for being assertive. He did it because she crossed the line into blatant disrespect. Like it or not, this was his stage, and he set the rules. He decided who spoke and when, and if he didn't call on you, you didn't get to hijack the moment. Simple. But instead of following the same protocols as every other journalist in the room, Kaitlan tried to force her way through, ignoring the decorum expected in that setting. Trump wasn't stifling the press. He was maintaining order, ensuring that all reporters had their turn to ask questions. The professional move for Kaitlan? Wait, like everyone else. Instead, she chose a more dramatic approach, seemingly more focused on making headlines than getting answers. Of course, restraint has never been CNN's strong suit, and as for Trump, he wasn't finished with her just yet. While responding to a completely different question about Mitch McConnell, he took another swipe at Kaitlan, just to remind her, and everyone else in the room, exactly who was in control. Trump stands his ground, reinforcing his leadership with a commanding presence. In this exchange, he doesn't just respond, he asserts control, countering her remarks with precision. While tough questions are necessary, approaching the discussion with respect and solid facts is just as crucial. Had she come better prepared, the conversation might have taken a different turn, but in the end, Trump made it clear he wasn't backing down. Donald Trump has a knack for delivering brutal one-liners, and this time, Kaitlan Collins found herself squarely in his crosshairs. With just a few sharp jabs, he had her scrambling, grasping for a comeback that never materialized. Then came the knockout. Locking eyes with her, he dropped a line that sent shockwaves through the room. She was just as incompetent as Mitch McConnell. Silence fell as the weight of the insult sank in. Collins had walked in expecting to control the narrative, but instead, she found herself completely dismantled in real time. This wasn't just a passing remark, it was a calculated strike. In a matter of seconds, Trump exposed what he saw as her bias, shaky arguments, and failed attempts at playing tough. He wasn't just shutting her down, he was sending a message to her and the entire press corps about who was really in control. And judging by Collins' stunned reaction, that message hit its mark. But Trump wasn't done yet.